As you guys know, UFC 312 will be taking place in Australia, and it will be headlined by the main event of Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis, which is a rematch of a very controversial fight that happened a year ago at UFC 297. And before making this video, I went back and rewatched that fight for research purposes, and honestly, I scored that fight towards Sean Strickland. I believe that Sean Strickland won rounds 1, 3, and 5 quite comfortably. I don't think that that was a robbery for Dricus necessarily, but in my opinion, I believe that Sean Strickland won that fight. However, in the rematch at UFC 312, both fighters are going to be starting with a clean slate, and each fighter is going to have to give it their all to prove why they deserve that middleweight belt. So in this video, we're going to be taking a deep dive and analyze each fighter's style, and using this information, I'll be providing my predictions on who I think will win this matchup, which will be happening at UFC 312 on February 8th. So, starting with Dricus Du Plessis, Dricus, he's a very unorthodox type of fighter. However, I do think that as he's been getting into bigger fights, he has been getting more and more technical in his approach. In his earlier fights in UFC, he had more of a reckless, more wilder style. But like I said, I do think that he's kind of like honing in the type of way that he fights. And the way that Dricus fights is actually very interesting. He uses explosive movements and he blitzes forward in these short bursts, usually like 1 or 2 overhands, or maybe a short left-right hook combination. And the thing about these blitzes is that they're so short that it doesn't really give his opponents time to land effective counter shots. The most they can do is like time their jab as soon as Dricus starts moving in. Robert Whittaker, he was doing that when he fought Dricus Du Plessis, but no one in the UFC has really been able to land that devastating counter shot because of how short the blitz forward is from Dricus. In addition to this, another thing that keeps his opponents from landing that clean counter shot is his defensive high guard, which is a great quality that he displays in his fights. Usually when you watch the way that unorthodox fighters who don't really conform to the norms of striking and defense, usually those fighters sacrifice their defense for more offensive capability. For example, Yuri Prochazka, he doesn't keep his hands up, but he's able to land punches offensively from a different angle. However, Dricus Du Plessis, he is always keeping that high guard nice and tight. He tucks his chin, and even though he's unorthodox, he is a very defensively sound fighter, and that is going to be hard for fighters to effectively land counter shots when he blitzes in, because he does put his guard down when he blitzes in, but like I said, it's a short blitz. Then he goes back to the high guard, where he's safe from any counter shots that his opponents might try and land. Usually the downside of using a high guard is that you're usually susceptible to body shots. However, Dricus Du Plessis' compact torso and long arms avoids most of the downsides of the high guard because his elbows come down and it effectively protects his rib area. However, the center of his body is open, so he's susceptible to those stabbing teep kicks like Sean Strickland was using on him when they first fought. And let's not forget, Dricus Du Plessis, he is a very competent striker, so he knows how to manipulate his defensive guard to avoid taking damaging shots. Dricus was a kickboxing world champion, and he was a double champion in another MMA promotion. So Dricus Du Plessis, he is a very seasoned and skilled fighter. So his unorthodox approach to fighting is a testament to his experience and how he molded his way of fighting to work for him. Another thing that you have to mention when you're talking about Dricus Du Plessis is the cardio. In his earlier UFC fights, his cardio, it wasn't the best, and it seemed like he was actually like struggling to keep up, especially when the fights go into the deeper waters. But he has been working on his cardio. He had that nose surgery, and in his most recent UFC fights, Dricus Du Plessis, his cardio has been improving. That Israel Adesanya fight, his most recent performance, he looked like he was getting tired, but he was effectively pushing through, and he ended up finishing Israel Adesanya in the 4th round due to a submission. And that transitions us perfectly into another part of Dricus Du Plessis' game, and that is his wrestling and grappling. What makes his grappling and wrestling so effective comes down to how strong Dricus Du Plessis is. He is a very huge middleweight, and he is a very physically dominant fighter on the ground. He has good ground and pound. He finished multiple opponents with his ground and pound. His fight against Derek Brunson, he finished him with ground and pound. And if Dricus is able to take his opponents down, there is a very good chance that you're not going to be getting up until the end of the round, or he might just finish you on the ground as well. Also, Dricus Du Plessis is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, so he has that submission ability that he sometimes uses in his fights. Like I mentioned before, he was the first person to submit Israel Adesanya, who is an excellent defensive grappler. And when you take a look at Dricus's past fights, Dricus, he has 11 wins by submission, which is more than his 9 wins by knockout. So overall, he is a very well-rounded fighter when it comes to incorporating all the aspects of mixed martial arts. Now when we analyze Sean Strickland's fighting style, Sean Strickland has a few tools that he uses, but he uses these few tools so effectively that it's hard to effectively impose your will on Sean Strickland because he's so good at the fundamentals of boxing and using his footwork. So the first thing that you probably think of when you're looking at Sean Strickland's fighting style is going to be that Philly shell. He is one of the only users of the Philly shell in the UFC, and that is because the Philly shell is mainly used in boxing, and it's very good at protecting you from damage because the brunt of the punches that you're going to be absorbing is going to be parried off your shoulder. But the reason why a lot of fighters don't really use this stance in MMA, that is because it does leave you susceptible to leg kicks and getting taken down. However, to counter this, Sean Strickland, he has excellent takedown defense, and he is one of the best leg kick checkers in the UFC. Sean Strickland is a very defensively sound fighter, and a lot of the weapons that he uses is mainly to keep his opponents from bum rushing him and just overwhelming him. So he has a very good jab. That jab is lightning fast and is very sharp and precise, and that keeps his opponents at range. And he also has that teep kick. That is a very painful strike to keep taking over and over in the same spot. So those are really the main offensive weapons of Sean Strickland, and he rarely deviates from this path. However, when he first fought Dricus Du Plessis in the 4th and 5th rounds, Sean Strickland, he was throwing overhands and stuff that he usually doesn't incorporate. But when you mainly think of Sean Strickland, you're going to mainly think of the jab, the teep kick, the Philly shell, him checking kicks. And even though this might seem simple, this is a very effective style, and few opponents have been able to just get past these few solid techniques that Sean Strickland uses. Now, we also need to mention Sean Strickland's composure in the cage. His composure is a very core aspect of what makes these techniques work, because Sean Strickland, he's constantly using the Philly shell, he's constantly using the jab, and he's constantly checking kicks and teeping. Now, like I said, it might seem simple, but when you're fighting at the top of the UFC, in the top of your division, putting these techniques together is hard against when you're fighting fighters like Dricus Du Plessis, you're fighting fighters like Israel Adesanya, who are great fighters. Composure is a very underrated aspect of what keeps fighters' mindset staying on one single game plan. And Sean Strickland, he does this very well, and it allows him to control the pace of the fight and for himself to not get mentally overwhelmed when you're fighting someone like Dricus, who's constantly blitzing forward. And some people, they might call Sean Strickland's style boring, but it takes a lot of mental fortitude to implement that type of style and keep that same cadence and game plan through all 5 rounds, which Sean Strickland has shown he can do multiple times. Now, if we're discussing who I think will win this fight, I believe that Dricus Du Plessis is going to walk away with the win after UFC 312, and I have many reasons why I believe this. First of all, when you're analyzing this type of matchup, you have to realize there's no denying that Dricus Du Plessis, he has the power advantage in this matchup, and even though Sean Strickland, he does have a very good chin, if Sean Strickland makes one mistake in his defense, Sean Strickland could end up being put out cold. However, I don't believe that Dricus Du Plessis is going to get a knockout finish in this matchup. I actually believe that Dricus Du Plessis will win by a decision. But you have to consider that Dricus Du Plessis is more likely to knock out Sean Strickland. And this kind of leads into my second reason why I believe that Dricus Du Plessis will defeat Sean Strickland. And that is because Dricus has better finishing instincts. We saw that even though Dricus, he gets tired in his fights, if an opportunity presents itself to finish the fight, he is going to go for it. We saw that in his Adesanya fight. As soon as he got Adesanya rocked, and in the same round, he was looking exhausted. He was looking tired. But as soon as he rocked Adesanya with that punch, and he seen that he was hurt, Dricus, he jumped on Adesanya's back and submitted him. So not only does Dricus Du Plessis have the more likely chance to knock out Sean Strickland, he's just more likely to finish the fight in general. Like, do you really see Sean Strickland knocking out Dricus Du Plessis or submitting Dricus Du Plessis? No. Even when Sean Strickland had Adesanya rocked, he still wasn't able to finish that fight in that moment. And it turned into a 5-round fight where Adesanya, he had the chance to come back on the judges' scorecards and beat Sean Strickland if he wanted to. My third reason why I believe that Dricus Du Plessis defeats Sean Strickland is because Dricus is more creative in his striking. Sean Strickland, he is a very predictable fighter, and you really have a good understanding of how Sean Strickland is going to fight in this matchup. Like I explained when I was breaking down his style, Sean Strickland, he really only uses like 4 or 5 tools: the Philly shell, the jab, the teep, stuff like that. And when you look at Dricus, he throws more spinning attacks, he has a good clinch game, and it just makes Dricus more unpredictable. And when we're dealing with a fighter like Dricus Du Plessis, who is a very good game planner, he's going to have a good estimation of what Sean Strickland is going to do when they fight. And that is going to be easier to game plan against. And even when we look at their first fight, Dricus Du Plessis, in like the first 2 rounds, he was hitting air on most of his shots, and his overhands weren't really getting close. But in the later rounds of their fight, Dricus Du Plessis was actually landing on Sean Strickland very cleanly. It's just that Sean Strickland, he has such good defense that he was able to roll with some of the punches and take some of the force off of them. However, in this matchup, in the second time that they're fighting, Dricus Du Plessis, he's going to have a better understanding of Sean Strickland, and that's going to lead to Dricus Du Plessis being able to start a little bit faster in this matchup and win those earlier rounds, unlike what he was able to do when they first fought. And we've seen that Dricus Du Plessis, he's constantly evolving every single fight. And after he beat Israel Adesanya, I believe that Dricus, he has a newfound confidence about himself that he's going to be able to just go out there and he's not going to let Sean Strickland just bully him around. And Sean Strickland's style isn't really suited for the judging criteria, because Sean Strickland, he isn't constantly moving forward and causing a lots of damage and making big moments in his fights. However, Dricus Du Plessis, he's going to be coming forward more, and he's going to be causing those big moments that judges are going to be able to score. Now, moving on to my last reason why I believe that Dricus Du Plessis will defeat Sean Strickland, and that is just because Dricus, he is just the more well-rounded fighter. When you look at all of their attributes, Dricus Du Plessis, he incorporates the grappling, he has the wrestling credentials as well, and he is a very solid striker on the feet. And he was able to take down Sean Strickland quite a few times in their first matchup. However, he wasn't able to control him on the ground exactly. But if Dricus is just able to just mix up his fighting style in this matchup, it's going to leave Sean Strickland with a lot of different moving pieces to worry about. I believe that in the first fight, takedowns were probably the main reason why Dricus was given that type of decision. He had success in other areas other than the striking. So if Dricus Du Plessis can mix up his attacks, that is going to be a path to victory for him to win this fight. So that is going to be it for the analysis. My official early prediction for this fight is going to be Dricus Du Plessis by a decision. So as usual, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in my next video.